So the first question that we want to answer is how can we take one element and turn it into a different element? Do we have to add protons to it? Do we have to add electrons? Do we have to add neutrons? Or is it some magical combination of any of those? So take a look at the simulation that we've got here. We have hydrogen that we are starting with. Notice that this chart here tells us how many protons we have and how many electrons we have. So currently in hydrogen, we have 1 proton and 1 electron. We want to see what it takes to turn hydrogen into the next element on the periodic table, which happens to be helium. So the first scenario that we can do is we can add an electron. So let's see if adding an electron changes hydrogen into helium. Notice that hydrogen is still hydrogen, we just have 2 electrons now and only 1 proton. So that does not do the trick. I'm going to remove that electron, so we're back to our starting position. What about adding a neutron to hydrogen? So if I click add a neutron, does that change hydrogen into helium? No, it does not. It simply adds a neutron to hydrogen. Nothing else changes. So I'm going to remove a neutron. The last scenario is what if I add a proton? Notice that that was the trick in order to turn hydrogen into helium. Helium has 2 protons. If I remove a proton, now we're with hydrogen. So if I keep adding a proton, I can turn helium into lithium. Lithium has 3 protons. I can add another proton to turn it into beryllium, add another proton to turn it into boron, another proton to turn it into carbon. Now, something that you need to remember, especially as we're using this simulation, is we want to talk about neutral atoms first. Remember, the word neutral means it doesn't have a charge. So if protons are positively charged, they need to be balanced out by the negative charge of the electrons. If I add a proton, well, actually, let's take a look at hydrogen first. Hydrogen has 1 proton. It's balanced out by the negative charge of the 1 electron. If I add a proton to helium, it now has 2 protons. In order to remain neutral, it needs 2 electrons. So I would also have to add an electron there. If I add another proton to create lithium, in order to keep it neutral, I'd also have to add an electron. If I add another proton in order to create beryllium, to keep it neutral, I need to also add an electron. So the big ideas here, one element is different to another element because the number of protons is different, and neutral atoms have equal numbers of protons and electrons, and neutral means that it has no overall charge.